Hi, welcome back to the channel. First of all, I would like to thank the people who commented on my poem videos. You have no idea what that means. It really helps because one does put oneself out there, and it's just, to me, the most rewarding is when I can do something that helps someone else. So I appreciate your feedback. I'm coming on today well, for one, I'm gonna have to put this latest book review on further hold. I just can't bring myself to read this book right now. There's just much more pressing things going on, and I want to quickly give you a little glimpse into that, because I think, to the ones interested in autism, that is, because I'm actually planning on a project. It's been lingering inside of me for a long time, I think, that sort of topic, and I think I started working on it when I wrote my first book, which is The End of the Eye. It's linked in the description box below. I think I started sort of working on that there, which was almost 2 years ago now. And I feel that, well, there's this, basically I have a hypothesis and I would like to test it, but I don't know how to go about testing it yet. So I was going to just throw it out here and hear what you have to say about it as a first iteration, so to speak. And I'm going to couch this in a little bit of context. So what I did is I reached out to Professor Frith. She is a eminent neuropsychologist. She has been researching and working in the field of autism for decades. If you go to my playlist, Science of Autism, there's a bunch of videos, interviews with her. She's actually brilliant because she's able to encapsulate a lot of these sort of topics that are related to autism, and she's really she's able to encapsulate the essence of all these sort of topics, in a very short time, which I appreciate. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, go watch those videos because they're excellent. Anyway, so I reached out to her because I felt that if anyone would know, first of all, if that hypothesis of mine is worth pursuing, and second of all, if someone's already researching in that field, she would know. So I reached out to her, and I'm going to summarize what I wrote to her, and also in that sort of present my hypothesis. And my hypothesis pretty much is is more like a series of postulates at this point. So, and I have to qualify what sort of subgroup I'm talking about when referring to autistic community, because I'm well aware that there is such, I mean, since we're on a spectrum, and we have to differentiate, maybe a little bit who we're talking about. So I'm talking about high functioning autists. So because I feel obviously closest to that subgroup, since I probably fall into that category, and therefore I'm only going to be able to, if anything, make statements about that subgroup. So it makes sense to sort of limit yourself to that subgroup. So what I'm saying now, those couple of points that I'm going to make, are pretty much pointing to the subgroup of high functioning autistic people. So the first assumption that is part of this overall hypothesis of mine would be that high functioning autistic individuals are too busy processing sensory data for them to develop a sufficient sense of self or ego consciousness. That is an assumption of mine. It's based in my own experience, obviously, and what I'm doing with this, or what I'm aspiring to do with this project of mine, with this research project of mine, is to first of all understand understand my own experience, really wrap my head around my own experience. But then, if there's truth to that, if there's truth to what I'm saying, I think this might be beneficial to a lot of people on the spectrum, and it might help inform all types of fields, starting from psychology. We could develop probably much more fitting therapy for ASD people if we had a better understanding of what the sort of root experience is, and I feel that we owe it, we meaning autistic individuals who are actually able to verbalize at times, we actually owe it to our community to speak up and to contribute to research, science and research in the field, because we don't want to be just guinea pigs and sort of patients, to neurotypical doctors and researchers. We want to be active participants, in trying to get a hold, trying to manage, the condition. So anyway, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. But anyway, so that was the first hypothesis. So basically, the nature of the autistic brain is such that it's primarily preoccupied with processing data, be it sensory or inner data, but primarily sensory data, so that it's so much and at all times preoccupied with the processing bit that there is little or much less, chance for the autistic individual to develop a strong sense of self or ego consciousness. So that's the first assumption. My second assumption is probably more of a well, I hate to say it, but probably of a more spiritual nature, at best metaphysical nature, and that is that this lack of self in autistic people results in a propensity to live more from a place of universal consciousness. So since we cannot develop such a strong sense of self strong sense of self or ego consciousness, we are much more prone to default to a broader sort of consciousness, which I term universal consciousness for lack of a better word, and that of course has connotations to the whole non-duality movement that purports that from a spiritual point of view, humans are supposed to basically realize that ego consciousness or the concept of self is just a concept, it's nothing real and it's just a concept, and basically it stands in the way of enlightenment. So that's the spiritual part of it anyway. So the third assumption I'm making is that, and that's really that's what I put in my first book, well, that's part of my first book, was that if you take an evolutionary view, I mean, if you kind of take a helicopter view, and regard the human evolution as a total, and you could say that adopting universal consciousness and overcoming ego consciousness might be, a pivotal step in the evolution of humanity as a species, actually. And the fourth assumption is sort of linked to this third assumption, and that is I feel that if we fail to, as a species, if we fail to make this evolutionary step, if we fail to adopt universal consciousness as our primary I don't even know what to call that, primary field of being or something, point of view of being, then we're probably going to self-annihilate, because I think that ego consciousness is good for a while. I mean, it's necessary in the evolution of a species, but there comes a point where it becomes self-destructive, and we are clearly now, in terms of right now, 2024, we are at a juncture, as a species, that obviously, because of our technological capabilities and the amount of irrationality of a lot of leaders in this world might as well culminate in the annihilation of humanity. So there's a possibility that this can happen. And my fifth assumption is that there's a possibility that it is nature's way to avoid this sort of annihilation. I mean, introducing ASD into humanity's genome, so to speak, is nature's way to avoid annihilation. I mean, and I really need to qualify at this point, and I don't propagate a God complex, on the side of people with ASD, not at all. I'm just saying that apparently or evidently there has been genetic mutations in the whole evolutionary history of humanity, and it seems that ASD might be a very prominent type of mutation, because it's just, I mean, there seems to be a growing prevalence, of ASD in the general population. So you could say that, well, that's just coincidental, or that's just because we are starting to measure ASD and hence we're finding it all over the place. But if my assumptions 1 to 3 are correct, then it might as well be something, that is actually beneficial for humanity, in all the pain and the suffering that the condition causes for the individual. That might be a nice thought for us, to think that somehow by our being we are contributing to the to sustain humanity. I'd love to think that. I think that's a nice thought. So anyway, so I sent those 4 or 5 assumptions, which together form my hypothesis, to Professor Jutta Frith, and she actually wrote back and I'm going to quote from her answer, because her answer isn't, there is nothing, I mean, I don't think she would mind. It's not personal to her in terms of her personal information. So she writes about, among other things, this is an excerpt. About 20 years ago, I gave a talk about the idea that paradoxically autism has as much to say about what it's like to have a dominant self as an absent self. I proposed the hypothesis that autism might be best understood as an absent self. An absent self would explain a range of difficulties found in autism that can be attributed to difficulties in what cognitive neuroscientists call executive function or top-down control. I never took this hypothesis any further, as nobody had shown any interest in it. So basically what she's saying is that, I mean, she doesn't concur with all my, she doesn't concur with all my assumptions. She just says that there is a part in there that crossed her mind a long time ago, but she never dug into this topic. And with that, she actually gave me somewhat of a confirmation to take this further, to go down that rabbit hole. And she, thankfully, she recommended a book. And the book is called The Ego Tunnel, The Science of the Mind and the Myth of the Self. It's actually by a philosopher named Thomas Metzinger. I guess it's German. The original is German anyway, but it is available in English, and it's from 2010 originally. So I actually ordered the book already, so I'm going to absolutely read that. And what I'm also doing at the moment is I'm doing some research in terms of, what are some papers that are out there, what are some academic papers. I had recently, I guess like a couple months ago or so, I had downloaded about 30 or 40 papers that concern themselves with, the self and autism, in connection with autism. And I kind of saved those for this project, which I never took on so far. And now I came across two more papers which sound really intriguing. The first one was, I'm going to put a screenshot, Emotional Ego and Altercentric Biases in High-Functioning Autism Spectrum Disorder, Behavioral and Neurophysiological Evidence. So I'm going to read that next. As well as Personal Identity After an Autism Diagnosis, Relationships with Self-Esteem, Mental Wellbeing and Diagnostic Timing. I'm going to read that too. I mean, it's going to be extremely hard to, I guess, isolate when looking at the formation of self-consciousness or self or ego consciousness. It's going to be extremely difficult to isolate autism as one factor, because obviously if you, for instance, just giving you an example, if you, for instance, grow up with in a family where there is a sort of traumatizing component, in your childhood. For instance, if you have a narcissistic parent or something like that, and you are right from the get-go are confronted with, all kinds of traumatizing things, and you sort of come out of adolescent with PTSD already, that might be obviously a factor for your not being able to, having developed a strong sense of self or ego consciousness. So we have to be really mindful of comorbidities, obviously, and I think nevertheless, and that's sort of one of my the second major motivation of mine, is to sort of depathologize ASD as a condition, because it is debilitating to have ASD. It really is. It truly is. But what I'd like to focus on is what are the benefits of the condition, So I don't look to embellish the condition at all. But I don't want to limit myself to talking about the negative effects of ASD. I want to research the potential, and see and find the kernel of gold and make that bigger, really, so I just wanted to give you that first sort of description of the project that I have in mind, and I would really, really love to hear from you all, no matter if you are autistic or not, if you have anything to contribute to that line of thinking. I strongly believe in early, I strongly believe in, iterative approaches. So I want to throw out my ideas early in the process and take your feedback and incorporate it, and then do another round. So any thought is appreciated, and I'm gonna keep you posted on the progress of this thing. Bye.